Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for a journey across the vast, whispering grasslands of medieval Mongolia where the air tastes of dry sagebrush. And the only sound louder than the wind is the steady beat of hooves beneath you. You're not a warrior, not a king or merchant, but something far more essential. A courier, the pulse of an empire, galloping from camp to camp with messages rolled tight in leather pouches. Tethered to your waist and your sense of duty, you ride through the steppe under a sky so wide it seems to press down on the earth, turning everything, small and quiet except your own thoughts, which drift like stray sheep. Dust clings to your boots. Your cloak smells faintly of smoked goat, and your knees already ache from riding a Mongol pony that's more endurance machine than noble steed. And no, you probably wouldn't survive this. Between the unpredictable weather, the wolves, the long lonely stretches between stations, and the occasional arrow just a casual occupational hazard, you'd be begging for a nap and a Netflix break by midday. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? I'd love to know. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift slightly in the saddle, the rough wool of your robe chafing your collarbone. The air carries the scent of horses and cold earth. In the distance, the silhouette of yurts glimmer against a rising sun. This is the Mongolian steppe, 13th century, a place where silence holds power, and messages mean more than swords. Well, most of the time, you've just passed your initiation, not with fanfare, but with a squint from a grizzled station chief, who handed you a quiver full of documents and a boiled dumpling before pointing east. Ride until the river splits, he'd said, then switch ponies. And don't eat all the dried fish in one go this time. The life of a relay courier is fast-paced, but not fast in the way modern life is. It's more like living inside a rhythm of hooves and horizon. Mongol leaders built the YAM system, their postal relay network, by stringing together stations every 25 to 40 kilometers across their massive empire. It's a web of hoofprints stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Eastern Europe. These were not your average roadside inns called cottage. These outposts offered food, shelter, and fresh horses like 13th century truck stops, minus the coffee and neon. You'd arrive exhausted, dismount, hand off your official Jarija medallion that said, "I'm allowed to be here. Don't spear me, please," and sink onto a felt mat while a grumpy host poured you sour milk. Genghis Khan's empire was big, unreasonably big. Think you could ride for 3 months and still be in Mongolia big. But instead of inventing teleportation, the Khan engineered something almost as surprising for the time: organized communication. The YAM was his pride. It moved battle orders, tax receipts, diplomatic messages, and once, allegedly, a roast duck. Wrapped in wool, historians still argue whether that's myth or just very committed takeout. Closing parenthesis. It also moved fast. A rider could cover up to 200 miles in a single day if the ponies were fresh and the route forgiving. Each stop was ready with horses pre-fed and watered. attack already laid out. Efficiency? The Khan might have been the first to say logistics. Wins wars without even knowing what logistics meant. You watch as a falcon circles overhead, wings tilting on thermal drafts. The bird reminds you of messengers who never got a second chance, those lost in blizzards, or worse, who failed to deliver and faced, let's say, severe managerial feedback. But the system wasn't just about orders. It shaped daily life. It carved roads where there were none. Traders followed its paths. Villages sprouted beside it. Even enemies grudgingly admitted that the yam was something remarkable. Marco Polo raved about it, writing more about the post stations than the actual conquests. Your pony snorts, impatient. You're due at the next cottage by nightfall, and the clouds gathering ahead say you better move. As you lean forward, urging the horse into a trot, you wonder how many feet have followed this trail before you, and how many whispered stories lie buried in hoof-scuffed soil. A ground squirrel bolts across the path. You barely notice. You're thinking about the map in your mind. The trail isn't marked by signs, just the remembered curve of a hill, the smell of a certain tree, the way the sun hits a frozen stream dot, and that's where we leave you for now. Riding east, with a head full of wind and a pouch full of empire. The wind grows stronger as you ride, tugging at the loose folds of your coat and rattling the small brass buckles on your saddle. The clouds thicken ahead, casting long shadows over the undulating steppe. Somewhere behind you, the sun disappears entirely, giving way to a grey blanket of overcast calm. It's the kind of weather that makes your eyelids heavy, your thoughts slower, your shoulders a little tighter with cold, but your mind stays awake, drifting not to the next station, but that way back to the man who made all this possible. Temujin, better known now as Genghis Khan, though he probably wouldn't recognize the statue of himself in Ulaanbaatar, with its gleaming armor and suspiciously shampooed hair. No, the real Temujin was grittier, grimmer, and far more obsessed with communication than history gives him credit for. The yam system was his brainchild. He saw early on that conquering was only the beginning. Ruling a massive, multi-ethnic, cross-continental empire meant that you had to be in a dozen places at once. Since cloning himself was off the table, he did the next best thing. He made sure his words could ride faster than any army. And so, around 1206, Temujin began assembling a network. Every 25 to 40 kilometers, a relay station, every station staffed with a few dozen hardy locals, each responsible for keeping horses fed, fires going, and soup on the boil. Couriers like you carried messages sealed with the Khan's temga, riding until they reached the next post, then swapping ponies and galloping on. You hear the rhythm of it now in your bones. Ride, dismount. It's something weird. Ride again. It was the circulatory system of the empire. Historians still argue whether the system began as a purely military tool, or whether Temujin envisioned it from the start as a civil infrastructure. Either way, by the time he was done conquering, the yam stretched over 12,000 miles. That's about half the Earth's circumference, in case your brain is starting to fog dot, and it worked incredibly well. So well, In fact, that it made some of the Khan's enemies nervous. If a message from the Khan can reach the edge of our kingdom in a week, they reasoned, so can his army. You pull your scarf higher over your nose as the wind sharpens. In the distance, a dark shape emerges. It's the next station, nestled in a dip between two low hills, smoke curling from its chimney. You feel a pang of relief. That means warm milk and possibly a stale dumpling. At the height of the yam's power, there were over 1,400 stations like this one, all linked with uncanny precision. Each station stocked with around 50 horses, ready to run at a moment's notice. The riders weren't just fast, they were legendary. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, of a message being delivered from the Mongol capital of Karakoram to the Persian Gulf in just over a week. That's a distance of roughly 4,000 kilometers. The same journey by ox cart would have taken a month and several therapy sessions. Inside the station, the keeper greets you with a grunt and points to a steaming pot in the corner. You toss in your each without ceremony. These silver or gold plaques were your passport, your proof that you rode for the Khan. Without it, you might find yourself politely asked to leave with the blunt end of a spear. You slide onto a felt-covered bench, shedding your outer cloak. Your hands tingle from the sudden warmth. The soup smells faintly of goat and garlic. You don't ask, what's floating in it? You don't want to know. As you slurp your way through the bowl, your eyes wander to a low shelf stacked with scrolls and wax-sealed pouches. Not all messages are urgent. Some will wait a day or two for better weather or a fresher horse. Others, they'll leave tonight, regardless of sleet or snow or the wolf you saw shadowing your path earlier. The keeper joins you at the fire, chewing something that looks like dried liver. You're lucky, he mutters. Two riders didn't show last week. Snow swallowed 'em whole. You nod slowly. That's not uncommon. Routes got blocked. Riders got sick. Horses got spooked. But the yam rolled on. Always. It was bigger than any one rider. As you stretch your legs, you run your fingers along the leather pouch on your belt. Inside, the message. You don't know what it says. You never do. Could be an order for more millet. Could be a warning to a distant noble. Or it could be something entirely unexpected. Like the time you delivered a hand-drawn map of a salt cave shaped suspiciously like a camel. Historians rarely mention the silly parts, but they were there. Jokes scribbled in margins, doodles of angry chickens, complaints about saddle sores. Even empires have a sense of humor. You refill your water skin, thank the keeper with a small bow, and step back into the cold. Your next horse is ready, a sturdy little beast with shaggy hair and an expression of deep suspicion. You mount, grip the reins, and with a sharp whistle, you're off again. The wind has shifted now. Snowflakes begin to drift lazily from the sky. The clouds part just slightly, and for a moment, the steppe seems silver and endless. You ride on, because someone, somewhere, is waiting for your message. Asterisk, asterisk. Snow crunches underhoof, but your pony moves with practiced ease. Hooves striking the frozen dirt like clockwork. It's not the first time this animal has done this route, probably not even the 10th. You pat its neck lightly, grateful for The steadiness beneath you. In the distance, smoke curls lazily from another Gatige station's chimney, promising warmth, food, and hopefully fewer fleas than the last stop. When you arrive, you're ushered in with a grunt and the usual once-over. The station keeper, bundled in thick woolen layers and a fox fur hat that's seen better centuries, snatches your gerige, eyes it, then nods toward a pot simmering over a clay hearth. Goat stew, he says, pointing with a crooked spoon. Still, got bones in it, good for the knees. You slide onto a low wooden bench, savoring the steam wafting from the pot. You're bone-tired, but the rhythm of this life is almost comforting now. Rive, eat, rest a moment. Ride. These relay stations weren't just convenient, they were crucial. Genghis Khan built them like a nervous system, each node designed to receive and transmit. Everything revolved around efficiency. A tired rider couldn't make good time, so he needed warm food, dry shelter, and ideally a fresh pony that hadn't just wrestled a wolf on the trail. So, the stations became self-sustaining hubs, often staffed by families who knew every rider by the slump of his shoulders or the color of his scarf. The food wasn't glamorous. You probably wouldn't find Orju cuisine trending on social media anytime soon. But it got the job done. Stews thickened with root vegetables, jerky tougher than your grandmother's opinions, and the ever-present Eric-fermented mare's milk that smells like regret and tastes like revenge. It's fizzy, it's sour, it's warm, and it somehow makes your teeth feel like they've been insulted. Still, you drink it, partly out of politeness, mostly because you know what's coming. Another 40 kilometers of wind-whipped open plains, with nothing but your own thoughts and a very vocal crow population for company. The keeper's wife brings you flatbread wrapped in coarse linen. She doesn't say much, just offers a tired smile and a bowl of broth. These women, often the quiet backbone of the relay system, managed more than just cooking. They cared for sick animals, kept the books, stitched saddles, and probably knew more Mongol state secrets than some generals. Historians still debate how centralized the Yam system really was. Did the Khan's court micromanage every station? Or did local autonomy reign supreme? Most likely, it was a bit of both. Some stations were funded by imperial taxes, others supported by tribute or sheer neighborly obligation. But the uniformity, same distances, same protocols, same weirdly chewy bread suggests someone at the top had a vision. You set down your bowl and lie back on a fur mat. The ceiling is low, beams blackened with years of smoke. Somewhere in the rafters, a mouse scratches softly. You breathe deeply. The smell of wood smoke, sweat, and horse leather wraps around you like a second blanket. And that's when you hear it. A jangle of tack, a snort. Another rider, arriving late. You sit up, blinking groggily, the newcomer face red from wind and eyes sunken with fatigue, stumbles inside, clutching a pouch like it's made of gold. Urgent. He says, Imperial Seal needs to go east. You groan softly. Guess who's going east? But that's the job. No complaints. No delays. You rinse your face with cold water, bite into a strip of dried fish so tough it may legally count as a weapon, and prepare for another ride. Your next horse is smaller, scruffier, and currently glaring at you like you owe it money. Mongol horses weren't elegant creatures. Not like the tall, dramatic European breeds with flowing manes and existential drama in their eyes. No, these were shaggy, compact little tanks. Low maintenance, high durability. The Toyota Hilux of the equine world. They grazed freely, could find grass under snow, and could nap while trotting. Really, there are accounts of these ponies dozing mid-march, eyes half closed, still keeping pace. Your own mount seems halfway there already, swaying slightly as you adjust the stirrups. You mount up again. The sky is darker now, sun long gone, moon just a sliver. You wrap your cloak tighter, listen for the soft jingle of the reins, and push. Off into the night. This route's quieter than the last. Fewer wolves, more wind. Your thoughts wander. You think about that stew, possibly goat, possibly shoe. You think about the keeper's daughter who asked if letters ever carried poems. You think about how strange it is that an empire so fearsome could be held together by soup. Ponies and mildly sarcastic station hosts. The yam wasn't a glamorous legacy, but it was effective. It moved armies. It moved economies. It even moved ideas. And you're just one more thread in that great invisible web. Your horse breathes in thick clouds. Each exhale a puff of steam swallowed by the dark. The sky above is a frozen quilt of stars, clear, vast, and indifferent. You tighten your scarf, grip the reins a little firmer, and lean forward into the cold. The next station lies hours away. But that's the rhythm now. Gallop, glide, survive, repeat. As you settle into the steady clop of hooves, your mind drifts to the unsung heroes of this entire system, the riders. People like you who carried not just messages, but the weight of the Khan's authority on their backs. The day in the life of a yam courier is not one of leisure. You're constantly sore, constantly half-hungry, and always on alert. If you're not avoiding predators both four-legged and occasionally to your dodging snowstorms, crossing frozen rivers, or getting lost in valleys that look exactly like the last 5 valleys, orientation by boredom is surprisingly unreliable. The good news: Mongol couriers were well respected, sometimes feared, often envied. You had status, a badge of sorts. The jurij, that silver medallion hanging on a chain from your saddle, carried the full weight of the empire's backing. To interfere with a rider was punishable by death. To feed him was an honor. Still, you couldn't eat respect, and it didn't keep you warm at night. You remember passing another rider earlier today. A nod was exchanged. Nothing more. There's a quiet camaraderie among young couriers, an unspoken understanding that you're all part of something larger, but individually disposable. That's fine. You don't do this job for glory. You do it for the ride. The trail curves gently uphill. Somewhere in the darkness, you hear a howl. Not close, but close enough to keep your heartbeat awake. Wolves. They rarely attack a mounted rider, but occasionally the winter hunger wins out. You pull your cloak tighter. Listen for hoofbeats besides your own just in case. Your horse stumbles slightly, then corrects. You mutter a quick apology to the animal. Mongol couriers were famous for treating their horses like co-workers rather than property. You'd rotate through 5, sometimes 6 in a day, fresh horses at each station. But even between stops, riders were known to jump from one horse to another mid-stride to keep both animals fresher longer. Historians still argue whether that story of a rider switching horses at full gallop is legend or just another Tuesday in the yam. Honestly, you wouldn't put it past some of the more show-off types. You've heard of a courier once delivering a love letter and a sack of millet. In under 12 hours through a blizzard, you reach a frozen stream, its surface gleaming under moonlight. You pause, letting your horse sip from a break in the ice. The water gurgles faintly, echoing under the frozen crust like a secret trying to escape. The station you're headed toward is called Red Rock Post. It's named for a nearby cliff that glows pink at sunrise. Riders tell stories of a woman who lives there, brewing the strongest tea in the empire. You're skeptical. The last strong tea you were promised turned out to be more goat broth than leaf. Still, the idea comforts you. A hot drink, a chance to take off your boots without your toes screaming. Maybe, if you're lucky, a spot by the fire. You reach into your saddlebag and check the pouch again. It's still there, sealed, marked, and surprisingly heavy. You're curious. Of course you are. Every rider is. But you'd never open it. Not just because the punishment is, let's say, career-ending, but because there's an unspoken code. The message isn't yours. You're just the breath that carries it. Once, a senior courier told you the worst mistake is forgetting that you're not the voice, just the echo. Up ahead, a faint glow appears, a lantern swinging gently on a post. Red Rock. You let out a breath. You didn't know you were holding. As you approach, a dog barks once, then goes quiet. Someone steps out of the main tent, holding the door flap aside. From the west, she calls. You nod. She disappears inside and returns a moment later with tea. Real tea. Hot. Slightly smoky. Served in a ceramic bowl you suspect has never been washed. You drink gratefully. The postkeeper's name is Anara. She's older, with a face like wrinkled parchment and hands strong enough to crush walnuts. She asks if you've seen any snow leopards on the pass. You shake your head. She seems disappointed. Beautiful animals, she sighs, then gestures to a pile of blankets near the hearth. Rest if you like. Your next horse will be ready before moonrise. You settle in, stretching out on a pile of furs still warm from the last rider. The tea sits warm in your belly. Somewhere behind you, your horse is being rubbed down and fed. A bowl of oats, maybe a pat on the nose. You hope it's the same person who took care of the last one. They braided the mane afterward. Nice touch. You stare into the fire. Your eyes start to close. But you're not asleep. Not yet. Just paused, like the trail itself, waiting for the next stretch. Listening to the wind press softly against the yurt walls. Somewhere out there, the next message is already being written, and somewhere else, someone waits to hear it. Asterisk you stir just as the postkeeper nudges your boot with a gentle toe. Moons. High. Your horse is fed, she murmurs, already halfway through her own tea. You groan quietly and sit up, stiff and half-wrapped in a fur that smells faintly of something that may have once been yak. Outside, the wind has calmed. A thin layer of frost has crept across the ground, sparkling under moonlight like the world's coldest welcome mat. Your next mount, a stocky chestnut with a bite mark on its flank and a shaggy mane, stamps impatiently as you approach. You give it a quick rub between the ears and climb on. Now the rhythm returns. Hooves strike frozen soil. Your breath puffs in small clouds. The world narrows again to you. The pony and the road beneath. Tonight, your thoughts wander to the unsung star of the whole operation. The Mongol horse. Not sleek, not glamorous, but if reincarnation exists and you come back as a horse, you could do worse. Mongol ponies were like little tanks, short, sturdy, and so reliable that some couriers swore they could find their way blindfolded. Unlike the pampered war horses of knights in the West, these animals were low maintenance. No stables, no special shoes. Just let them graze, keep them dry, and they'd carry you across deserts, swamps, and frozen tundra without complaint. Well, aside from the occasional side-eye, and here's the strangest bit: these horses could nap while moving. Yes, while trotting. You've seen it yourself, once. A fellow courier drifted off in the saddle during a long stretch. His pony slowed, found its own path along the trail, and even paused at a stream to drink before nudging him awake with a casual snort. Try that with a French stallion. Historians still debate the exact origin of the Mongol horse's stamina. Was it sheer adaptation, generations of selective breeding, divine intervention via horse-loving spirits? Probably some mix of all three. What's certain is that without them, the yam would have collapsed under its own ambition. You shift your weight, careful not to disturb your pony's gait. Mongol riders rarely used saddles with towering pommels or deep seats. Theirs were simpler, lighter, designed for speed, not comfort. Still, your backside registers a formal complaint with every trot, and yet, you'd rather ride than walk, not just for speed, but for the rhythm. The hooves sync with your heartbeat. The trail unwinds like ribbon before you. The landscape slips past ingredients of shadow and snow. Somewhere behind you, a fox darts across the trail, its white coat nearly invisible. Your horse flicks an ear but doesn't flinch. It's seen worse. You remember stories traded between riders at station stables, of ponies who knew when a rider was injured and carried them the full route, solo, of horses who refused to cross rivers just before floods surged through. One tale even claimed a pony once led its half-frozen rider to shelter by scent alone, then returned to its previous station by memory. Tall tales, one of the older station masters muttered once, but then added, "Still, wouldn't surprise me." You press on. The moonlight paints everything silver, and your breath feels like silk scarves unraveling in the wind. You hum quietly to keep yourself awake, a half-forgotten lullaby from childhood, about a wandering herder and his stubborn ox. Your horse does not seem impressed. Ahead, you see the faintest flicker of firelight, a temporary camp, not a station too. Small, probably a herder's yurt, or maybe a family on seasonal migration. Still, It's strange to find them here in winter. As you pass, a child peeks from behind a flap of felt. You wave. They wave back, grinning. For a moment, you wonder what they think of you. To them, you're not just a courier. You're something else, a moving part of a machine too vast to understand. Maybe they imagine your pouch holds royal secrets or messages for a general. Maybe they hope it's full of candy. It's not. It's full of dry parchment, wax seals, and the occasional rice inventory list. Still, you like the idea that your passage means something to someone. As the camp fades behind you, the trail turns rocky. Your pony slows to navigate carefully. You're reminded again how good these animals are, how they don't just move. They think. Mongol riders didn't control them with brute force. Instead, they guided with subtle shifts, voiced commands, and, sometimes, bribes involving apples. Your own horse snorts suddenly and veers left, avoiding a slick patch of ice. You hadn't even seen it. You reach forward and scratch its neck in. Thanks, you realize, not for the first time, that this animal knows this path better than you do. Eventually, the ground evens out again, and your pace picks up. You're well into the night now. Stars wheel above you. Somewhere in the dark, you hear an owl call. The next station is close, maybe another hour. You reach into your pouch for a bit of dried cheese. It's sharp, crumbly, and tastes vaguely like someone smoked a rock and added salt. Still, it does the job. As you chew, your thoughts drift to the future. You wonder, hundreds of years from now, will anyone remember these ponies, these trails, this quiet system of messages moving endlessly across open land? You hope so. You hope someone somewhere writes it down, even if it's just a sleepy podcast, or a line in a dusty book, or a whisper on a cold wind, carried far by hooves. Asterisk, your next station appears without fanfare, just a faint shape rising from the dark, framed by two crooked trees, and the suggestion of smoke curling from a low chimney. It's not much, but to a courier nearing the end of a long night ride, it might as well be Shangri-La. A sleepy-eyed attendant greets you with a yawn and a handful of barley for your pony. You dismount, legs wobbling slightly, and hand off your gerige. No words needed. You're waved toward a pot simmering on coals, and you settle onto a padded mat that's just firm enough to remind your spine it still has opinions. Inside, the station is quiet, warm, and smells like pine wood and boiled cabbage. You sip broth and stretch your legs, your bones creaking in protest. It's strange how the body seems to grow heavier the moment it knows it can rest. But before long, the map in your head starts stirring again. Routes, rivers, landmarks. You've memorized more than 100 stretches of land. Not through charts or scrolls, just muscle memory, repetition, and instinct. Mongol riders didn't rely on maps in the way you might imagine. Not many carried written guides. The trails themselves became the map, learned by heart and refined over time like a song passed from rider to rider. The YAM system had no fixed signage, no neat mile markers. Instead, riders used natural cues: the bend of a stream, a crooked tree, the smell of a sulfur spring. They knew how certain valleys echoed in fog, They could spot faint trails barely visible to outsiders. The faint scuff of hooves from earlier riders, just enough to guide the way. One story you remember, a courier once traveled from Karakoram to Samarkand by remembering how many days the moon had been waning at each major turn. Not quite GPS, but it worked. Historians still argue whether this navigation method was purely intuitive or part of a larger oral training system. Were young couriers explicitly taught mnemonic devices? Did they train on foot first? Walking routes. Before they rode them, there's evidence for both theories, and knowing the Mongols, probably a mix. You're living proof of that. No one gave you a map, just a direction and a reminder not to get eaten. You look over at the station wall, where someone has scratched tiny horse silhouettes. Into the beam, maybe counting journeys, or just bored during a long snowstorm. Either way, it's a familiar ritual. You've done the same. Sometimes you draw mountains. Sometimes you draw birds. Once, you etched a very bad sketch of what was either a goat or your first station commander. He was not impressed. You finish the broth and rise slowly, grateful for the brief warmth. Outside, your next mount is already waiting taller than the last, with one ear nicked from an old fight and hooves the color of ash. You whisper a soft greeting before mounting. And once again the trail calls. Now, the landscape changes. Gone are the open steppe and gently rolling hills. You're entering a forested zone, trees crowding close, branches reaching like fingers. The path narrows. You slow your pace, letting the pony pick its steps over half-frozen earth and roots that curl like sleeping snakes. Here, everything sounds louder. The crack of a twig, the rustle of something small in the underbrush, the faint creak of your saddle leather. You lean forward, whispering encouragement to your horse, who seems a little less enthusiastic about this stretch. You think of a trick another rider taught you: sing softly, to keep bears away. Not that bears really care about your musicality, but the rhythm keeps you awake and them, hopefully, uninterested. Your voice drifts through the trees, low and steady, a nonsense tune from your childhood about a herder who fell in love with a cloud. You forget the ending. Probably for the best. It was tragic and involved a lightning bolt. Eventually, the trees thin and the path opens again. The air feels different, here sharper, colder. You're climbing slightly, heading toward the river pass. And here's the thing. You've been this way dozens of times, but the land is never the same twice. 1 week, there's a landslide and the trail diverts. Another, there's a frozen creek that wasn't frozen before. You adjust, reroute, memorize the new flow. That's how you build a mental map, not from ink on parchment, but from hours in the saddle, cold in your bones, and the occasional angry goose ambush. You reach a small rise and pause. From here, you can see the valley below, wide, quiet, and silvered with frost. A station lies just beyond the far ridge. Not your next stop, but close. You note its location anyway. You always mark the next 3 in your mind, just in case. You nudge your horse forward. The pony snorts once, then picks up its pace. You think about how riders in other empires traveled, often slower, more ceremonial, with scrolls bound in silk and guards in tow. Here, you've got your pouch, your pony, and a vague idea of what season it is. And still, the Mongols outpaced them all, because where others relied on signs and scripts, the Yam relied on riders like you. Riders who knew that the land itself was a kind of language and, if you listened, really listened, it would guide you. The wind picks up again as you descend the ridge. Your scarf flaps, and your horse flicks, its tail in mild annoyance. You grin. Another hour, another message. Another mile whispered into the earth. Dawn finds you halfway through a frosted valley. The sun stretching long shadows across the frostbitten grass. The pony beneath you is solid, steady, breathing plumes into the cold like a miniature steam engine. The chill has settled deep into your shoulders, but your mind feels oddly alert, sharpened by the quiet and the rhythm of movement. As you crest a low hill, the vast openness reminds you just how large this empire truly is. It's staggering. From the coasts of China to the plains of Hungary, from Siberian forests to Persian deserts, the Mongol Empire was a sprawl of languages, landscapes, and loyalties. Yet somehow, against logic and even probability, it worked. And much of that came down to the Yam. It didn't go unnoticed. In fact, other empires looked at this relay system and thought, yes, please, we'll take one of those. The Persian Ilkhanate, the Islamic branch of the Mongol dynasty in Iran, adopted it nearly wholesale. They called it the Bard, tweaking the system slightly to fit local terrain and governance, but keeping the backbone, relay stations, fresh horses, and a tightly monitored network of trusted couriers. The Ottomans picked up the habit too, eventually refining their own courier network centuries later. Even in Europe, long after the Mongols had receded from view, pieces of the Yam echoed forward. Italian merchant states, impressed by what they'd heard from travelers like Marco Polo, developed proto-relay services of their own. Not as fast, not as vast, but the seed was there. Historians still argue whether the Mongol postal system directly influenced the eventual rise of Royal Mail systems in Europe, or whether similar ideas emerged independently. But the parallels are hard to ignore. Centralized oversight, station-to-station travel, priorities seals. Even the language stuck around, some scholars trace European terms for courier back to interactions with Mongol intermediaries. As you ride, you imagine the first time a Venetian merchant stumbled upon a Mongol courier stop. Picture it, expecting dust and disorder, only to find hot food, organized stables, and a pouch system more secure than half of Europe's banks at the time. It must have been like discovering a medieval Amazon Prime hub, complete with express, shipping and customer support in multiple dialects. And yes, you wonder sometimes, what would Genghis Khan make of modern logistics? Of overnight packages and international tracking numbers? Probably nothing good. He'd ask why you needed so many scented candles delivered, and then conquer your village just for fun. But he would respect the speed. He understood speed better than anyone. Your pony slows slightly to navigate a shallow river crossing. The water glimmers with morning light, ice clustering along its edges. You guide the animal across carefully, boots just inches from the freezing surface. The cold seeps in regardless. On the far bank, you pause to water the horse and stretch. A rocky outcrop provides a small windbreak, and you sit for a moment, chewing on dried apricots left over from a gift at a past station. Sweet, tough, and exactly as satisfying as a 3-day-old dream. It's strange to think about the invisible thread that runs from here, this frozen patch of middle-of-nowhere Mongolia, all the way to the court of a king, in some distant land, and stranger still that you, wrapped in wool and regretfully moist socks, are a living piece of that connection. Messages didn't just move orders. They moved alliances, trade, marriages, warnings, cartloads of bureaucratic nonsense, and sometimes culture. You remember a story from another rider about a scroll carried across 10 stations that contained only a poem, a love poem, no less, written by a noble for someone halfway across the empire. The rider joked that it was the most passionate declaration ever carried alongside tax ledgers and goat requisitions. You finish the apricot, remount, and continue. The trees thin again, the land rising into open scrub. The wind is picking up, not strong, but persistent. The kind of wind that whispers just above your ear, offering half-finished thoughts and unfinished songs. Your horse seems to know the route. Instinctively, you let the reins slacken and focus on the sound of hooves on hard soil. Every few kilometers, you see signs, small, easily missed indicators that a station lies ahead. A grouping of poplars, a stone set at an odd angle, a cluster of prayer flags faded nearly white. You think again of the systems in place, the quiet organization beneath it all. Riders, routes, posts, policies. It's tempting to romanticize it, but you know better. You've lived it. The yam is not glamorous. It's not glorious, it's endurance, it's trust. It's riding through a thunderstorm at midnight with a half-healed ankle, because the message doesn't care if you're tired, and still. There's a beauty in that dot ahead. You spot the next station just a dot at first. Then the telltale signs of movement, a horse tethered to a hitching post, smoke curling from a low yurt, a few chickens scratching at the frozen ground like they've misplaced their ambitions. You smile. Maybe they've got soup. Your pace quickens. So does your heart. Because while the empire grows and rulers change and wars break out in places you'll never see, some things stay the same. The road. The wind. The quiet promise of a message carried faithfully forward. The soup is, miraculously, not terrible. A mild broth with turnip, a few stray noodles, and something that may have once been lamb, though it's probably better not to ask. The station keeper, a middle-aged man with a single eyebrow that stretches nearly ear to ear, refills your bowl without a word, and then returns to scrubbing a saddle with suspicious intensity. You sit cross-legged by the fire, feeling your toes again. Outside, your pony is being rubbed down and given water. You hear it snort appreciatively or sarcastically. It's hard to tell with ponies. You glance at the message pouch tied securely to your belt. It hasn't left your side in days, not during sleep, not during rest stops. That's not just protocol, it's instinct. Because this isn't just mail. This is the blood flow of the empire, and not all blood runs clean. See, the yam system wasn't just about letters and rice orders. It was a network woven with secrets, espionage, subtle threats, the occasional bribe, and quite a few lies. Mongol rulers were masters of information. Messages weren't always what they appeared to be. A courier might be carrying a scroll with instructions for a tax audit and hidden inside the seams of the pouch a second scroll with orders for surveillance or execution or marriage proposals, depending on the day. Historians still argue whether the yam operated a formal intelligence branch, or whether espionage simply wove naturally into the job. But the effect was the same. When the Khan wanted to know something, he had dozens of ways to find out, many of them galloping through the frost. With ordinary-looking riders like you remember a tale told around a station fire once. A courier vanished mid-route when his pouch was later found near a ravine. It contained a double-sealed scroll with a wax imprint not matching any known regional authority. Rumor had it he was carrying false orders meant to mislead a rebellious noble. Whether the rebellion failed because of the deception or despite it is still a mystery. But the point stands. The yam wasn't just the empire's circulatory system. It was its nervous system to dot. Your own pouch may be full of harmless logistics, but it might not. It might contain a diplomatic missive laced with double meanings, a warning disguised as flattery, a coded message only readable under lamplight or beside a certain type of incense. You'll never know. And that's the point. The Khan's genius wasn't just in his tactics or brutality. It was in his ability to gather and manipulate information faster than his enemies could react. The yam allowed him to do that, to watch borders in near real time, to know which general was loyal, which ally was wavering, which merchant owed more taxes than he admitted. You rise slowly, stretching. The station keeper finally speaks. Rider, came through 2 nights ago. Said the South Pass is iced. Take the long curve east. You nod. It'll add time, but not danger. The iced pass is risky even for mountain goats. And you've got more important things to deliver than your own frozen corpse. Your next mount is already prepped, a grey pony with uneven eyes, and the calm patience of a bored monk. You mount, tug your scarf into place, and ride. The station fades behind you. The land opens again, and so do your thoughts. You remember one courier who told you he once carried 3 different messages, each telling a different governor to prepare for an alliance. Later, all 3 were called to the capital, where one was promoted, one exiled, and one quietly removed. Whether their letters were tests or traps is still unclear. But that's the yam. It never just carried news. It carried strategy. You've heard whispers that some couriers weren't just messengers, but informants, chosen not just for their riding skills, but for their ability to observe. Take mental notes of troop movements, population mood, harvest, quality, and to report back without ever writing a word. There's power in seeing, in traveling. You've been places most nobles never will. You've watched border villages prepare for winter with more efficiency than a palace staff. You've seen the scars of old battles on roads no one else remembers. You've met the child of a general and a herder, raised in secret. You've crossed paths with monks, mercenaries, and once a dancing bear. Each ride is a lesson, not always a comfortable one, but always useful. The road rises, the wind picks up, the trees thin. You're approaching the long curve east. As warned, the sun is climbing now low in the sky, but golden. It casts everything in soft amber. Like the world is being slowly glazed in honey dot, you guide your horse carefully along the edge of a bluff. Below, the valley yawns open, mist curling like breath. Somewhere down there, a village brews morning porridge. You smell wood smoke and something faintly sweet. You pause, not out of fatigue, but to listen, to breathe. In this moment, you are the empire, not its face, not its sword, but its whisper, its silent momentum, the steady, unglamorous urgency that holds everything together. And you ride on, because the pouch still holds secrets, and the wind still wants to hear them. You descend into the valley slowly, your horse picking its way along the soft, thawing trail. The path here is muddier, quieter, flanked by shrubs still dusted in frost. Birds chirp, maybe confused by the sudden sunshine. It's the kind of morning that tempts you to stop, to just lie down and let the warmth melt into your skin. But your pouch reminds you otherwise, a gentle weight against your hip. You reach flatter ground, and soon enough, a small wooden post looms ahead. No yacht, no smoke, just a dry marker and a tied-off scroll wedged behind a rock. A waypoint. Not every piece of the yam was a full-fledged station. Some were just drop points, places to cache messages or supplies, especially along less used routes. You dismount to check the scroll. It's a weather note, scrawled in an elegant, rushed hand. Ice cracked on northern ford. Avoid bandits. Spotted west of tree cluster. Ride safe. You tuck it back. You won't need the northern ford today, but you whisper a quiet thanks anyway. Back in the saddle, your thoughts wander. You've seen many forms of information across these roads. Ink on silk, seals pressed in wax, pouches sewn shut with thread soaked in horse blood. But today, you're thinking about how this system so ancient in feel foreshadows something startlingly modern. You're thinking about Temujin and Amazon Prime. You grin to yourself. The comparison seems ridiculous, but it holds up surprisingly. Well, Genghis Khan didn't invent today's shipping, but he got close. And he understood something many rulers even today seem to miss. Control doesn't come from sheer power alone. It comes from speed, from reach, from predictability. Historians still argue whether the yam's consistency was better than what some modern governments manage today. There's something funny about that, in a dry, almost British way. Imagine it. A customer review from the 13th century. Message arrived in 3 days instead of 4. Rider smelled like goat, but very polite. 5 stars. You chuckle softly. It's not far off. The yam ran on human trust, each post reliant on the last. Each rider taking up the thread from someone they'd likely never meet. A chain built not from iron, but from promise. And if that doesn't remind you of cloud-based logistics, well, Maybe you're not getting enough sleep. Back in the present, well, your version of it, you pass an old marker stone chipped with names riders used to carve messages here, warnings, jokes, initials. You spot one from years ago, a crooked heart etched beside two initials, K plus T. You smile. That rider, K, once drank you under the table at a stop near the Gobi. Last you heard, they were delivering tax notices to Korea. You ride past the stone, the trail firm underhoof. In the distance, the land flattens again. A stream glitters. A few deer bolt across the path. Your pony doesn't even flinch, just keeps moving, steady and sure. The Mongols didn't just master movement. They mastered organization. Every station logged rider arrivals and departures. Every courier was registered, tracked, sometimes even questioned. The system wasn't loose. It was rigorously enforced, documents stamped, verified, timed. Genghis wanted order, and the yam was how he got it. There were consequences, of course. If you stole a horse from a station, death. If you lied about a delivery, also death. If you let your pony eat all the carrots meant for the next rider, okay, maybe just as serious scolding. But you get the idea. Still, the efficiency was unmatched. Messages could fly across Asia in days. Orders were issued, trades arranged. Roads repaired, all because riders like you kept moving. Your pony starts to huff. The trail ahead curves upward, another climb, a slow one. You let the reins loosen and focus on breathing, not because you're tired, but because riding uphill always feels like pretending not to be tired. Midway through the climb, you spot another trailer side route, narrow and half overgrown. You've taken it once before. It cuts 2 hours off the trip, but only if the weather holds. You hesitate. Then take the main road instead. You've learned not to gamble with ice and blind turns. The sun's higher now. Birds flit overhead. You sip from your water skin. Gag. Slightly it tastes like old saddle and dried mushroom, and make a mental note to refill it soon. You crest the ridge just as the next station comes into view. This one's newer, with a patched canvas awning and a bright red flag fluttering outside. A delivery post on the expansion route. Proof that the yam is still growing, still evolving. As you ride in, a boy no older than 12 rushes to take your reins. Rider from the east. He asks. You nod. He grins, wide and gap-toothed, and leads your pony to water. You dismount slowly, joints cracking like old firewood. Inside the station, everything smells fresh. Someone's been baking. You're handed a bun, still warm, filled with sweet beans. You close your eyes and let the sugar flood your bloodstream. It tastes like sleep, like home, like 2 minutes of not being responsible for the political stability of an entire continent. And then you reach for your pouch again, because even here, even now, the message still moves. You stay at the station just long enough to change horses, down a second bean bun, and accept a saddle adjustment from a woman who insists you're sitting like a bent chair. She isn't wrong. Your new pony is eager, tall for a Mongol breed, with wide nostrils and a patch of white down its nose. like a streak of paint. You mount up, stretch your legs once, and ride back into the trail's long silence. The day's brighter now. The frost has started to retreat, and small puddles reflect the sun like fragments of a shattered mirror. You're not cold anymore, just comfortably numb in the way only couriers understand. As you follow the narrow ridge eastward, you can't help but think about what exactly it is you're carrying. Not this specific pouch, but in general. What kinds of words, warnings, and wishes make it into the leather cylinder you keep strapped close? It's not just war orders and census updates. Sometimes it's something stranger, like that one time you rode with a scroll addressed only to the man with the blue falcon. No one at the station knew who that was. You delivered it anyway. The man existed. He wore a falcon-shaped brooch and smelled like cloves. He didn't thank you, just nodded, and disappeared into the hills. And then there was the parcel that jingled. You were instructed not to shake it. You did, of course. It jingled louder. Turned out to be a pouch of coins meant to pay a sculptor for a monument that, as far as you could tell, never got built. Probably for the best. It was supposed to be in the shape of a giant duck. Historians often overlook the contents of yam messages. They assume dry decrees and battle updates. And yes, those were plentiful. But Mongol couriers carried everything. Love letters, grain orders, condolence notes. One time, even a painted tile meant to match a set in a noblewoman's bathhouse. You pass a rock formation shaped like a sleeping lion and smile. That's your halfway marker for this route. You've seen it in rain, snow, fog, and once while being chased by a very aggressive goose. Still not sure if it belonged to someone or just lived on the route. As a sort of feathered highway menace, the road dips, weaving into a gulch where the earth is darker and the wind whistles. Like a broken flute, your horse stumbles slightly, but rights itself. You whisper encouragement. You're thinking now of one of the most curious messages you ever delivered, written in poetry, sealed in beeswax, and addressed to no one. It simply said, "Deliver to the last house before the river bends." And there was a house, and someone there, a woman with ink-stained fingers who read the poem, cried once, and handed you a bundle of herbs in return. No explanation, just a nod. What did it mean? Who wrote it? You don't know. You never found out. And that's part of the job. Historians still debate whether yam couriers were aware of the larger narratives. They moved within or if they were deliberately kept in the dark. Some say certain elite couriers were debriefed after routes, asked what they'd seen or heard. Others argue most riders were kept distant, moving blindly through the empire's chessboard, unaware of the pieces they helped shift. You suppose both things can be true. You've had times where station masters asked if a general looked ill, if a bridge was still standing, if a field had already been planted. Sometimes your observations were jotted down. Sometimes they were just grunts exchanged over noodles. But always, the message moved. You reach the edge of a small grove and stop for water. There's a natural spring here, half hidden behind a rock. You let your pony drink deeply while you kneel and splash your face. The water is freezing, sharp, Necessary. From here, it's 2 hours to the next major station. And you're starting to wonder, will this message be passed along? Or are you the final rider? Will a guard collect it? A merchant? A monk with oddly good handwriting? You adjust the pouch slightly, feeling the weight of the scrolls inside shift. One is thick, bound with red cord. Another, light as a feather, with corners curled from damp. Whatever they are, they'll get there. You've never failed a route. And today won't be the first time. Back in the saddle, you push forward again. The trail widens. Wind rustles the grass in low whispers, and suddenly you think, this isn't just about the empire. It's about people. Because behind every message, there's a person waiting, hoping, wondering if what they wrote will reach the other side, if their request will be heard, if their love letter will be answered, if their map will be followed, if their warning will come in time. You carry those hopes. That's what the yam really is, a network of hopes on horseback. And you keep riding, because those hopes, they're not going to deliver themselves. The trail bends along the edge of a shallow ravine. The land dipped just enough to gather mist. Your pony moves cautiously, hooves crunching frost, where sunlight hasn't yet reached. You tug your cloak tighter, less for the cold and more for the habit. Riders always look a little more dignified with a dramatic flap of fabric. The pouch at your side hasn't shifted, not once. You give it a glance, wondering again about the contents, but your thoughts are drawn elsewhere. You're thinking now about the people who rode this trail before you, and those who rode beside them. Not just men, not just generals or hardened messengers, but women. Women of the Mongol steppe didn't just wait in tents. They didn't only raise livestock or stitch saddlebags. Some of them rode. Really rode. They ran posts, managed stations, even joined delivery routes when needed. And, in some cases, they outpaced their male counterparts with ease. There's the story of our tight margin, a postmaster's daughter who reportedly made a 4-day ride in 2.5, carrying news of a bandit ambush to a nearby camp. She was 14. Her reward, a new saddle and, allegedly, an entire cake. You'd have settled for just the cake. Historians still debate the scale of female involvement in the yam. Some argue women primarily stayed at stations. Others insist they frequently took to the trail. What's clear is that in a culture where riding and survival were essential, skill mattered more than gender. If you could handle a horse and didn't faint at the sight of goat stew, you were probably in. And they weren't just riders, they were innovators. Women adjusted saddle designs for longer distance comfort. They tested new methods for waterproofing scroll pouches using waxed wool and animal fat. One legend tells of a woman named Cullen who rigged a signal system using reflective metal shards to warn of incoming riders from a hilltop station. Primitive semaphore, maybe. Practical, absolutely. You reach a crest and spot another trail marker, a totem of bones and tied cloth, fluttering like a sleepy scarecrow. Offerings to spirits, ancestors, or maybe just a bit of good luck. You give it a nod as you pass. You think about the lives of those station women, how they'd wake before dawn, light fires, brew sour tea, bake hard cakes, water horses, clean. Tack. How they'd read faces and ride routes when riders failed to return. How they became archivists of the trail not in scrolls, but in memory. One such woman, Erdine, ran a remote post near the Orkin Valley. Writers said she never forgot a face and once diagnosed a sick horse just by listening to its breathing. She was also known for a soup so spicy it made grown men weep, which is likely why messages arrived early at her station. You adjust your seat again, muscles stiff but cooperative. The sun is higher now, not warm, but earnest. You pass a copse of fir trees and smell smoke, someone cooking with pine wood nearby. A small traveling camp tucked out of sight. Your thoughts drift to how the Mongols redefined the idea of station. In many empires, a postal stop was a fixed, formal building. Stone, flags, bureaucracy. The Mongols, a yurt, a pot of stew, a fresh pony. Sometimes a family tent where children helped sort scrolls while their mother mended saddlebags. It wasn't rigid. It was practical. You once stayed at a post managed entirely by sisters. They coordinated rivals like a military unit, tracked inventory with stone markers, and taught you how to massage a horse's leg to keep the blood flowing. You still use that trick on long rides, especially when your pony starts giving you the not again ears. The idea of domestic spaces doubling as imperial infrastructure would make Roman senators faint. And yet it worked beautifully because the yam wasn't about looking grand. It was about function, endurance, trust, and families, including women, were at the heart of that trust. You stop briefly to drink and rest the pony. The trail ahead begins to slope again, descending toward the next water station. You take a moment, stretch your arms overhead, and feel the satisfying crack of spine-aligned bones. Then you think of another woman, not a courier, not a station keeper, but a noblewoman who once sent 17 letters in 1 week through the yam. Her name is lost to time, but the station ledgers record her Ceylon intricate stamp depicting a squirrel surrounded by flames. The contents of those letters, unknown. Theories range from political chess to a complex marriage proposal. You like to think it was both. You remount and continue. The path levels, then opens into a flat basin of pale grass and scattered shrubs. A herd of gazelles scatters in the distance. Your pony flicks an ear, but stays calm. You've grown used to the rhythm of travel now. Each hoofbeat another line in an unspoken poem. And in that quiet, you remember something simple and profound. This system, the yam, is built not only on men and maps and armies, but on people. Quiet people, tireless people, women hauling water, saddling ponies, memorizing trade routes, patching scrolls, baking bread, stitching cloaks. They didn't just support the system. They were the system. And now you carry them to in every hoofbeat. In every mile. The air grows sharper as the trail pulls you northward. Your breath forms tiny clouds that break apart in the wind, and your pony exhales with a low grunt, as if sharing its personal opinion on the weather, which, based on the ice clinging to your reins, is fair. This leg of the journey is one of the harshest, The route cuts across a high plateau exposed to fierce winds and biting cold. There's no shelter here, just you, the pony, and the strange frozen silence of winter. You lean forward slightly, trying to warm your face in the shadow of your own cloak. Your fingers, despite layers, feel stiff. There's a stretch of frozen mud ahead, the kind of terrain that tricks hooves into sliding when they least expect it. You dismount to lead the pony carefully, boots crunching with each step. Winter on the yam wasn't a break. It was an additional obstacle. Riders didn't stop. Messages didn't wait for spring. If anything, winter made them more urgent, villages low on supplies, commanders watching ice-bound borders, envoys needing clearance for warm shelters. And so the couriers adapted. Winter gear for young riders was an evolving science. You've learned the hard way which cloaks repel wet snow and which turn into icy sponges. Some riders swore by double-layered felt boots. Others wrapped yak hair around their legs before pulling on hide trousers. You've experimented with both. Neither stops the cold from creeping in, but they delay it a little. The horses, on the other hand, barely seemed to notice. Mongol ponies were built for this thick fur, wide hooves, and a stubbornness that laughs in the face of a -30 wind chill. They graze through snow, sniff out buried water, and often appear to judge you silently. When you complain, you reach a small rock outcrop that breaks the wind slightly. You remount. There's a rest station ahead. One of the smallest, just a single yurt with a stone hearth and maybe a handful of warm blankets. If you're lucky, it's called Otkin's Post. No one remembers who Otgon was, but everyone remembers. His soup, thick, spicy, and allegedly able to bring numb fingers back to life. You hum to yourself as the trail continues, a soft, tuneless melody just to keep your jaw moving. Sometimes the silence gets too loud. Sometimes the cold whispers back. And then, in the distance, you see it, a thin curl of smoke, a low silhouette, Otkin's Post. You feel the tiniest surge of joy, buried under layers of exhaustion. The closer you get, the more you smell warmth-burned pine, meat, and something floral. You don't question it. You arrive and dismount stiffly. A bundled woman emerges and waves you in. No questions, no pleasantries, just soup and heat. Inside the yurt, it's dim and red-lit from a central fire. She hands you a wooden bowl without asking, as if she already knew you were coming. The soup is as thick as legend promised. You drink half of it before remembering to breathe. You from the ridge route. She asks. You nod. Cold, you nod again. The woman snorts a laugh and tosses another log on the fire. You peel off your outer layers and hold your hands near. The flames, pins and needles return painful, but welcome. Your pony, outside, is being fed and brushed. You heard it nicker softly as you stepped in. That's the kind of place this is. Riders have whispered about Otkin's Post for years, not for its speed or wealth, but for its odd consistency. Even in the worst winters, it's always stocked, always warm, always ready. No one quite knows how. Maybe it's the woman, maybe it's a trick of the trail, or maybe, just maybe, some stations exist in their own small realm of magic and reliability. You Sip more soup and drift into a half-sleep. Your pouch rests on your lap, still warm from body heat. You don't open it, of course, but you do wonder, could it be winter news? Emergency grain requests, a message to a wandering healer, or just a list of names and numbers. Meant for someone more important than you'll ever meet. Doesn't matter. Your job isn't to decode. It's to deliver. After a while, the woman taps your shoulder. Storm's coming in, she says. Leave now, or wait till morning. Your call. You check the pouch. Think about the sender. The urgency stamped into every rolled scroll. You shake out your arms, stand up slowly, and nod. I'll ride. She smiles. UNSURPRISED. Your next mount is already saddled, shorter, broader, and somehow fuzzier than the last. Its breath clouds the air as you mount. As you head out into the darkening wind, you glance back once. Otkin's post is already fading into the snowfall dot, and ahead, just white dot and duty. Asterisk, the snow falls steadily now, not in blinding sheets, but in a fine, persistent dusting that turns the world into a charcoal sketch. Your horse's ears flick backward and forward, its hooves muffled against the fresh powder. Visibility is just good enough to follow the trail, but barely. You lean into the wind, hood pulled low, eyes narrowed against the sting of the cold. You've been through worse. Rain so hard it flattened trees, sandstorms that swallowed the horizon, nights so dark the stars seemed swallowed whole. But winter snow has its own kind of silence, one that feels endless, and oddly peaceful if you let it. This stretch of road moves you toward the Empire's western fringe, and with it comes memories of the first time Mongol messengers encountered. Envoys from Europe. They were confused. The Europeans, that is, diplomats from France, Venice, and the Papal States arrived expecting barbarism, chaos, maybe a little screaming. What they found was a fully functioning postal network that outpaced anything they'd ever seen. One chronicler described his awe at how Mongol stations operated with such swiftness. It was as though the wind carried their words. He then promptly got food poisoning from yak milk and left that out of the final draft. Understandable. Historians still argue whether the yam directly influenced early European postal systems. But something clearly stuck. Within a century, rudimentary versions of state couriers began cropping up in Hungary, Poland, and parts of Germany, each bearing suspicious resemblance to a system Genghis Khan had designed 100 years earlier. You pull your scarf tighter as a gust of wind throws snow sideways into your face. The pony keeps moving, unbothered. Honestly, if anyone deserves medals in this network, it's the horses. Mongol ponies took the idea of endurance and turned it into performance art. As you push through a narrow pass, you think about how bewildered those European ambassadors must have been. They came seeking treaties or conversions. What they found instead were riders who changed horses faster than they could sign documents, and messengers who spoke 3 languages and could deliver insults in all of them. You once saw a courier deliver a scroll from Karakoram to Kiev in just over 2 weeks. 2 weeks across rivers, deserts, hostile territory, with nothing but the wind at his back and dried curd in his pack. When he arrived, The recipient was still writing his reply to the previous message. That's how fast the yam was. You crest another ridge, and for a moment, the snow clears below you. A village lights its lanterns, a soft glow against the white. You exhale, slow and even. The descent will be steep, but it's manageable. Halfway down, you pause. A rider approaches from the opposite direction, his pony puffing steam. His scarf iced over. He nods, says nothing. You exchange brief looks, then continue. No words needed. He knows, you know. The message moves, and as much as the Europeans admired the yam, they feared it too. Because if the Khan's words could arrive before you'd even heard the hoofbeats, so could his army. The postal route and the military route were often the same. You pass a cluster of trees bent under snow, their limbs bowing like monks. A fox darts out ahead of you, startled, then disappears into the woods. Your pony ignores it. You're nearing the next station. It's a newer one, built hastily after the old post was washed out by spring melt. This one's sturdier, raised on wooden stilts, with bark-packed walls and a hide-flap door. You see smoke curling from the chimney and catch a faint smell of roasting onions. You didn't know how badly you needed that smell until now. The keeper here is young, barely old enough to shave, wearing a hat to sizes too big and boots he's probably stolen from an uncle. He greets you with a grin and a mug of hot tea. Long ride, he asks. You nod, grateful. He doesn't press, just gestures to a bench by the fire and sets a bowl of roasted turnip and onion in front of you. It's the best thing you've eaten in a week. Inside the station, scrolls line the walls, some still drying after being snow damp, others bundled in reed mats. Riders nap in corners, boots drying near the flames. The smell of horse sweat, wood smoke, and warm food fills the air. It's chaos. It's home. You slide your pouch off and rest it carefully in your lap. The messages inside are dry, untouched by the storm, still sealed, still safe. You feel a small flicker of pride. You look around at the other riders, a woman snoring softly under a woolen coat, a boy feeding a crippled hawk by the door, a grizzled man tracing roots in the ash beside the fire. These are the invisible hands of empire, the ones who never make it into the chronicles. No statues, no songs, just hoofbeats in snow and a network that never sleeps. You finish your food, close your eyes, and let the warmth sink deep into your bones. Outside, the snow starts again, and so soon you will too. The fire crackles beside you, casting long, flickering shadows on the yurt's felt-lined walls. You stir slowly, lifting your head from where it had slumped forward. You must have drifted off just for a moment. Around you, the quiet rhythms of a yam station continue low conversation. The occasional soft clink of bowls being stacked, a horse whinnying outside. You gather your things with practiced hands, the message pouch still warm from your side slides back onto your belt. You're not done yet. The road still stretches ahead. Though the snow has slowed, outside, flakes drift like ash in still air. Barely more than a suggestion. A pause. not a stop. Your new mount is waiting. A pale grey mare with one dark leg and the kind of expression that says she's seen it all and hasn't been impressed since summer. You mount up with a quiet grunt, adjusting your seat. The firelight behind you dims, swallowed by the fog of your own breath. This final stretch is slower, not in distance, but in feel. The urgency of the earlier ride has softened. The yam is still vital, but here, at the fading edges of the empire, things move differently. The riders are older, the stations fewer, the roads less worn by hooves. But that doesn't mean they're forgotten as you ride. The land flattens into a frozen plain. No trees, no hills, just an open whiteness that makes the horizon impossible to place. It's peaceful in a way that almost feels holy. You think of the stories told about this stretch, about riders who claimed to see things, hear spirits of old warriors, phantom campfires, horses that left no tracks. You've never seen any of that yourself, but you do feel something, a weight, a presence, like you're being watched or remembered. You ride on, and you begin to notice the markers here are older, weather-worn, etched in languages you don't recognize, scripts from southern steppes, northern forests. Desert cities now gone, proof that this road was used long before you, and will be long after. Historians still debate just how long the yam endured. Some say it faded quickly after the fall of the Mongol Empire. Others insist parts of it survived for centuries, hidden in local customs, small roads, borrowed words. You lean toward the second theory, because this doesn't feel gone. It feels quiet, resting, like the empire itself left behind footprints in the snow and a system too useful to disappear entirely. You pass a crumbling post marker carved with two overlapping rings, an old symbol of connection, alliance. You wonder who last touched it. What message passed beneath its gaze? By midday, the sun breaks through a pale disk hanging low in the sky. The light glances off the snow, turning the world into silver dust. You reach a narrow stream, still partially frozen, and let the mare drink. You sip from your water skin, now slushy from the cold, and chew the last of your dried plum paste. It tastes like leather and regret, but it gets the job done. You think now of the message you carry, not its contents, you'll never know those, but its path, the journey, from a court or camp, to a scribe's hands, to a pouch like yours, past rider to rider, mile after mile, across mountains, rivers, forests, plains, across languages, dialects, misunderstandings, long silences, and yet it's still here, still moving. You remember a tale from an older rider, long retired, who claimed to have carried a scroll across the entire width of the empire, from the Pacific coast to the Black Sea, 8 months, 72 stations, 14 different regional dialects, one lost boot. He never opened the scroll, never asked what it said. It's not mine to read, he told you, cracking walnuts with the confidence of a man who feared nothing but poorly stitched saddles. But it was mine to carry, and that's what matters. You think about that often, especially now. As you near your last ridge, there's a post station ahead, the last one on your current route. Beyond it lies a crossroads where the message will continue west, carried by someone else, or maybe this is the end. Maybe the person meant to receive it is there, waiting now, pacing near a brazier, warming their hands and watching the trail for signs of hooves. Either way, you'll deliver it. And after that, you'll ride again. Because this network, this quiet miracle of coordination and patience, never really ends. Even as the roads fade and empires rise and fall, the idea of it persists. A world held together not by conquest, but by connection. One hoofbeat at a time. As you crest the final rise, you see it, a small station, tucked in the shelter of a bluff, smoke curling upward, a post flag snapping gently in the wind. Someone steps outside and shades their eyes. They see you. They raise a hand. You raise yours in return. Then you ride the final stretch. Not fast, but steady, because the message must arrive, and you are the one who carries it. You dismount slowly, joints stiff, legs slightly unsteady after so many hours in the saddle. The post attendant, a man with weathered cheeks and a calm, unreadable face, takes your reins and wordlessly leads the mare to water. No questions, no ceremony, just routine, as it has always been. Inside the station, it's warm, not cozy, exactly, but solid thick felt walls, a low fire, benches worn smooth by decades of riders like you. You sit, unwrap your scarf, and reach for the pouch. The attendant notices. He nods. That's the one, he says simply. So you hand it over. Your fingers linger on the leather a moment longer than usual, not out of reluctance, but reverence. You've ridden with this message for days, across frostbitten ridges, past empty plains, through wind and silence and doubt. It became part of you. Its presence at your side was constant, a silent heartbeat. Now, it's gone. You let out a breath you hadn't noticed you were holding. The attendant places it in a box lined, sealed, marked. Someone's coming to take it west. He tells you. He'll be here by moonrise. You nod, only half listening. Your body aches. Your thoughts swirl. But more than anything, you feel, still, the ride is over. For now. You're offered food, warm millet cakes and onion broth. You eat in silence, chewing slowly, feeling each bite. Around you, the station moves gently, riders preparing saddles, horses being fed. A child sketching something in ash near the door. Outside, the wind hums like an old lullaby. You wrap yourself in a blanket and lie back on a raised mat. Your body relaxes almost involuntarily. Not sleep yet, but something close, a settling in the quiet. You think about the network as a whole, the yam, how it stretches unseen across vast lands, how it connects cities and yurts, palaces and farms. How it depends not on the glory of the few, but the effort of the many. You remember a saying passed between riders. The hoof forgets, but the dust remembers. You didn't understand it at first. But now, lying here, message delivered, boots still dusted with ice and trail grit, you think maybe you do. You'll ride again, maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week, another pouch, another message, another path across land that changes, but never ends. But for now, your work is done. The world turns. The wind carries stories. And somewhere, far away, a scroll is being unrolled. A message is read. And history quiet, dusty, and slightly undefined moves on. Wind down approx. 300 words, and now, as your eyes grow heavier, and the edges of the room start to blur into soft gold and shadow, I want you to breathe deeply and let the sound of the wind on the step carry you a little further from thought. There is no urgency now, no trail to follow, no scroll waiting to be delivered, just the warmth of your blanket, the hush of a world asleep, and the soft memory of hooves beating like a slow drum across distant plains. The station around you is quiet. The fire crackles low outside. The snow falls again gentle now, like the sky whispering its own secrets into the earth. And somewhere, across the land you've just crossed, other riders dream. Other messages move. But not you. Not tonight. Tonight. You rest. You've done what was asked. You carried a story across the world. You moved through silence and storm, and returned intact, if a little sore, and that's all anyone could ever ask. So now, let the cold stay outside, and let your thoughts loosen like reins dropped from tired hands. The wind is fading. The fire is low. And the journey for now is over. Sleep well, courier. You've earned it. Asterisk.